Well, good morning. It's this bright and sunshiny eve of Christmas Eve morning. I got that right. Welcome very much. Extend a welcome to everyone, to All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Ruth Robarge, member of the congregation. One of the joys of being your moderator is welcoming guests. If you brought a guest, if have family visiting and can stand up and introduce them, we would love that. If you brought yourself, you can stand up and introduce yourself. We'd love that if you're able to do so. Have any visitors? Yes?
Wait a minute.
Oh, well. I've got all day.
And my neighbor, my friend, Dan Roberts, is here. We come all the way from
Welcome. Welcome. Okay. Yes. Hey.
I'm home time of year. I visit my daughter here in Kansas City, and I find this place a wonderful.
Welcome back. I want to introduce my brother, James Rowan, who's here for the holidays. Yay.
Welcome. Well, whether you stood or not, you are very welcome. And we also want to extend our welcome to anyone who's joining us via live stream. So happy to have you here today. We shouldn't have any emergencies today, but keep in mind there are always 2 exits up here, and of course out the back there's doors if anything should come up. And that is all I have to say this morning. Enjoy the service. I think it's going to be a really good one.
Thanks, Ruth. Again, good morning, and welcome on this day of newly growing light, with the longest night just passed and Christmas morning only 2 more nights away. Each of the seasonal celebrations makes its own claim upon our minds and hearts. But here in 21st century American culture, Christmas is the dominant midwinter festival, the fixed point on the calendar, though not without some dispute. The blogger-poet John Pavlovich writes, "Yes, there is a war on Christmas in America. The evangelicals were right. The pulpit-pounding preachers were right. Franklin Graham was right. The Republicans were right. Donald Trump was right. Fox News was right. The religious right was right. Every single one of them was speaking the gospel truth. They've all been warning me for years, and I didn't want to believe them, lest hopelessness set in. But the proof is unavoidable now, and I need to confess that they were right and I was wrong. I once was blind, and now I see it clearly. They told me Christianity was under attack here. It is. They told me Jesus was being rejected. He is. They told me a brazen mockery was being made of his birth. It is. They told me the Gospels were being perverted. They are. They told me decent people were being deceived. They are. The only thing they neglected to tell me in their bombastic, sanctimonious, sky-is-falling sermonizing was the source of this offensive. These brutal Yuletide assaults haven't come from atheists or agnostics, not from humanists or Muslims, not from coffee franchises or the liberal media or excessively progressive Christians. The very white conservatives who've been loudly sounding the alarm are the incessantly advancing hordes. They're the only ones warring with Christmas because they've forgotten their own story. Christmas is a child of Palestinian Jewish parents desperately fleeing politically ordered genocide. Christmas is a dark-skinned child born amid the smell of damp straw and animal dung because no human-worthy welcome could be found. Christmas is a poor, itinerant, street-preaching rabbi living by the generosity of those around him. Christmas is a compassionate caregiver, feeding and clothing and healing whoever crossed his path. Christmas is a liberal activist fighting for the poor, condemning violence, shunning material wealth, and calling the world to live sacrificially for the common good. White evangelical America in 2018 has no use for this Christmas. In fact, it has open contempt for it. Because this Christmas is antithetical to its arrogant supremacy. This Christmas is incompatible with its rabid nationalism. This Christmas is counter to its ravenous capitalism. This Christmas is resistant to its closed borders and erected walls. This Christmas will not consent to its heartlessness, its callousness, its myopic America First hubris. And this Christmas is now hiding here in plain sight among the least of these. It is the weary father of four taking refuge from ice in a suburban church building. It is the exhausted family sprinting toward a border amidst chaos and tear gas. It is the transgender teenager trying to feel at home within their own body while being terrorized by lawmakers and preachers from without. It is the homeless veteran starving to death on the corners of their opulent megachurches. It is the grievously ill toddler whose parents have exhausted their resources just trying to keep him breathing. It is the young black man terrified during a traffic stop because he has seen this viral body cam video 100 times before. This is the Christmas these Christians are assailing and no one else. These religious people wage their war on Christmas with every social media diatribe, with every piece of legislation, with every phone call, complaint to police, with every ICE raid, with every homophobic rant, with every manufactured crisis, with every incendiary sermon. White evangelical Christianity, as it is currently constructed in America, cannot peaceably coexist with the Jesus of the Scriptures, with the truth of the baby in the center of the nativity, with the gritty, off-white, non-American reality of Christmas, which is why it is choosing to remove him. Those who seek to emulate Jesus and guard humanity need to speak this truth. We need to oppose their perennial act of aggression and their annual victim rhetoric. We need to fight for the sick child, the migrant family, the transgender teenager, the homeless veteran, the young black man. Because when we do, we are perpetuating the heart of that brown Middle Eastern child, born under duress in the place where livestock died, the one who turned the world upside down in the name of a compassion that knew no borders and a love that had no walls. Yes, there is a war on Christmas, and we have chosen our side. May this chalice flame illuminate our hearts this Christmas tide. May the old stories become as new as the headlines, and may our spirits arise once again to the angel's song of peace on earth, goodwill to all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Sean, and I light this chalice for the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and its society at large.
Thank you. Nicely done. Now will you rise in body or spirit and let us once again speak the words of our community's promise to one another. Together we affirm goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Now I invite you to remain standing and join in one of the classic holiday songs.
Today is the fourth Sunday in Advent, and I'm here to light the candle for that. We lit our first candle of Advent for people with disabilities. We remembered them and remembered all the joy and all the strength that they bring. Our second candle was lit for people who struggle at this time of year with mental illness, with family struggles. Our third candle last week was for the joy that we sometimes find in the midst of suffering. And our candle today is for justice. We light this candle for the just world we dream of. I'll try it again. for the work of all of those who persist and insist that when do we want it? We want it now. All the justice that we wish to see in the world.
Our commitment to human fellowship means that we are called upon to be glad with those who rejoice and to weep with those who mourn. And so we set aside this time in our gathering to share with one another the joys and concerns that are now shaping our lives. May the beauty and sweetness of these brief flowers remind us all to hold one another in the bonds of sympathy, encouragement, and care. We will have a moment at the end of our sharing when the cameras will be turned elsewhere. If you want to save your sharing until that time, you're welcome to do so. I begin with a flower for our good friend Joan Olson, who struggles with having recently had a heart attack. She's still in the hospital and will be coming home to rehab, we hope, in the next week or so. She's welcoming calls and letters, but not visits at the moment. Are there other joys or concerns that anyone would like to share?
I have two joys. One that my husband came through his heart surgery with flying colors.
Excellent.
And the second is that our daughter just got married.
Oh, well, congratulations. Why don't you put a flower for both of them? That's good news. Thanks, Jane.
Seeing Jan up here reminded me, she told me this week that Wilma Major is somewhat struggling after the death of her husband Major, so let's keep Wilma in her thoughts. Also, my own 11-year-old granddaughter is sick with flu in Manhattan, and then my son and his wife are in Chicago, and they're sick with flu. So, you know, let's think about those people who are having a less than joyous Christmas, but let's do hope for better days.
Yes. And let's get our flu shots. Thanks, Evelyn.
Good morning. I'm an attorney at the EEOC, and I'm one of the 800,000 federal employees.
Oh, shoot. Yeah, just hold it close.
I'm one of the 800,000 employees in the U.S. who are furloughed. I am fortunate to make a good salary, and I expect I'll be okay. But a great majority of the people who work for the federal government make somewhere between $28,000 and $30,000, and those people will be visiting food banks and living paycheck to paycheck. Some of us will get one more, but after that, we will get no more pay. We are forbidden from doing work, including answering our phone, taking messages, or checking email. So I invite you to speak to your congressmen and senators about that.
Yeah. Thank you, Dana. Best wishes.
Well, I also wanted to mention Wilma. We have another concern. Phyllis Westover lost her old puppy this week.
Oh, Obie.
Obie, who was, I don't know how old, but he was her puppy. Also wanted to say, in my joy, my beloved and I have just completed 35 years of hanging out together, and I guess we kind of have it figured out. So that's my joy.
Congratulations, Bonnie. That's great.
I have a thank you. I think the Yule Bog season is a wonderful program that we're involved with. I would like to thank all of the people who hosted us and have provided things. And what's especially so good about it is you can bring someone along that doesn't know any of the people there, that the people don't know, and that person can have a good time too. So I think that's a wonderful way we have of sharing our joys and concerns and all working together.
Thank you, Carolyn. My brother, sister-in-law, and their son have finally come back here to Kansas City. So that's going to be really exciting.
To stay.
Oh, yeah, they're coming to stay.
Hey, that's exciting, Isaac. Thank you.
Good news. Great.
Late last month, Rebecca and I lost a really good friend to cancer. And she had two boys that are exactly my boys' ages. And so I've been thinking about them a lot lately, approaching this Christmas without their mother. And so for everybody who's going to be celebrating Christmas with one less person around the table this year.
Yes, thank you. Are there other joys or concerns to be shared? I want to add one for all of those people like my friend Chris Cox and like Anthony Edwards who celebrate their birthdays right at this time of year and never get a real party. So my thoughts are with you guys.
We have suffered quite a few losses right around Christmas. My father, Richard Lee, who used to come here, a couple weeks ago, my brother Chris passed away just in his 20s and left behind a very young son. And my fiance lost her grandmother recently, so it's not our favorite time of year, but yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for telling us. Any other joys or concerns to be shared? And we have the camera off. Okay, if anyone wanted to come after the camera was off, this would be the time. If not, oh, yes, we do. Okay.
Today, I want for all of us to remember a great person that passed away a year ago. That was a longtime member here and a person that I really, really missed during the holidays because I always spent so much time with her. And that's my dear friend, Margaret McCormick.
Absolutely. I did not know that, so happy birthday to Karen. Anyone else have a joy or concern? If not, I will place one final flower for all the outreachings of the Spirit that abide unspoken in our hearts and invite you to join me in the congregational response on the screen. If, as Herod, we fill our lives with things, and again with things, when we consider ourselves so important that we must fill every moment of our lives with action, when will we have the time to make the long, slow journey over the burning desert as did the Magi. Or sit and watch the stars, as did the shepherds. Or brood over the coming of the child, as did Mary. For each one of us, there is a desert to travel, a star to discover, and a being within ourselves to bring to light. And now the children may depart for their classes, and we will sing for them.
Today's offering will be shared with the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. The UUSC, as we refer to it, advances human rights and social justice around the world. They partner with those confronting unjust power structures, and they mobilize to challenge oppressive policies. The UUSC is grounded, their mission is grounded in the belief that all people have inherent worth, power, and dignity. Recently, they've been very active on our southern border. They've been partnering with local organizations such as Freedom for Immigrants, No Más Muertes, or No More Deaths, Rural Community Workers Alliance, and the Undocu-Black Network. They give grants to those local organizations and help support their efforts to make change. They're also active around the world in crisis response and in climate-forced displacement efforts to help with those who are displaced by climate action. If you took home a guest at your table box earlier this season, that money that comes back in those boxes also goes to the UUSC, and Judith asked me to remind you that those should come back by January 6th. So the offering will now be gratefully received and given.
Christmas makes you feel emotional. It may bring parties or thoughts devotional. Whatever happens or what may be, here is what Christmas time means to me. City sidewalks, busy sidewalks, dressed in holiday style. In the air there's a feeling of Christmas. Children laughing, people passing, meeting smile after smile, and on every street corner you hear silver bells, silver bells. It's Christmas time in the city. Ring-a-ling, hear them ring. Soon it will be Christmas Day. Strings of street lights, even stoplights, blink a bright red and green as the shoppers rush home with their treasures. Hear the snow crunch, see the kids bunch. This is Santa's big scene, and above all this bustle you hear silver bells, silver bells. It's Christmas time in the city. Ring-a-ling, hear them ring. Soon it will be Christmas Day.
Will you please join me in dedicating our offering? We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change toward a just and compassionate society.
Don't look now, but there's something funny going on over there at the bank, George. I've never really seen one, but that's got all the earmarks of being a run.
Now, just remember that this thing isn't as black as it appeared. I have some news for you, folks. I was just talking to old man Potter, and he's guaranteed cash payments to the bank. The bank's going to reopen next week.
But, George, I got my money here. Did he guarantee this place?
Well, no, Charlie, I didn't even ask him. We don't need Potter over here.
I'll take mine now.
No, but you're thinking of this place all wrong, as if I had the money back in a safe. The money's not here. Well, your money's in Joe's house. That's right next to yours. And in the Kennedy house, and Mrs. Maitland's house, and 100 others. You're lending them the money to build, and then they're going to pay it back to you as best they can. Now, what are you going to do, foreclose on them?
I got $242 in here, and $242 isn't going to break anybody.
Okay, Tom. All right. Here you are. You sign this. You get your money in 60 days.
60 days?
Well, now, that's what you agreed to when you bought your shares.
Tom, did you get your money?
No.
Well, I did. Old man Potter will pay 50 cents on the dollar for every share you got.
Yes, cash. Well, what do you say?
Now, Tom, you have to stick to your original agreement. Now, give us 60 days on this.
Okay, Randall.
Are you going to Potter's?
Better to get half than nothing.
Randall, wait a minute. Wait. Now, listen to me. I beg of you not to do this thing. If Potter gets a hold of this building and loan, there'll never be another decent house built in this town. He's already got charge of the bank, he's got the bus line, he's got the department stores, and now he's after us. Why? Well, it's very simple. Because we're cutting in on his business, that's why. And because he wants to keep you living in his slums and paying the kind of rent he decides. Joe, you had one of those Potter houses, didn't you? Well, have you forgotten? Have you forgotten what he charged you for that broken-down shack? Here, Ed, you remember last year when things weren't going so well and you couldn't make your payments? Well, you didn't lose your house, did you? You think Potter would have let you keep it? Can't you understand what's happening here? Don't you see what's happening? Potter isn't selling, Potter's buying. And why? Because we're panicky and he's not. That's why. He's picking up some bargain. Now, we can get through this thing all right. We've got to stick together, though. We've got to have faith in each other.
But my husband hasn't worked in over a year, and I need money. How am I going to live until the bank opens?
I got doctor bills to pay. I need cash.
I can't keep back his own faith.
How much do you need?
Hey! I got $2,000. Here's $2,000. This will tide us over to the bank reopens. All right, Tom, how much do you need?
$242.
No, Tom, just enough to tide you over to the bank.
I'll take $242.
There you are.
That'll close my account.
Your account's still here. That's a loan. Okay. All right, Ed.
Well, I got $300 here, George.
All right, now, Ed, what'll it take until the bank opens? What do you need?
Well, I suppose $20.
$20. Now you're talking. Thanks, Ed. That's fine. All right, now, Miss Thompson, how much do you want?
But it's your own money,
Now,
George.
never mind about that. How much do you want?
I can get along with $20 all right.
$20. Fine.
And I'll sign the papers.
You don't have to sign anything. I know you pay when you can. That's okay. All right, Miss Davis.
Could I have $17.50?
That's your heart. Of course you can have it. You got 50 cents. 7.
We're going to make it, George.
6.
It'll never close us up today.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Bingo! We made it. Customer usage. We made it. Look, we're still in business. We still got $2 left. Well, look, let's have some of that. Let's celebrate.
Revenge by Elisa Chavez. Since you mention it, I think I will start that race war. I could have swung either way, but now I'm definitely spending the next 4 years converting your daughters to lesbianism. I'm going to eat all your guns, swallow them lock, stock, and barrel, and spit bullet casings onto the dinner table. I'll give birth to an army of mixed-race babies with fathers from every continent and genders to outnumber the stars. With my legion of multiracial babies, we'll be intersectional as fuck. And your swastikas will not be enough to save you. Because real talk, you didn't stop the future from coming. You just delayed our coronation. We have the same deviant haircuts we had yesterday. We're still getting gay married like nobody's business because it's still nobody's business. There's a Muslim kid in Kansas who already has written a schematic for the robot that will steal your job in manufacturing. And that robot will also be gay, so get used to it. We didn't manifest the mountain by speaking its name. The buildings here are not on your side just because you make them spray-painted accomplices. These walls do not have gender, and they all think you suck. Even the earth found common cause with us, the way you trample us both. Oh yeah, there will be signs and rainbow-colored drum circles and folks arguing ideology until even I want to punch them. But I won't, because they're my family, in that blood of the covenant sense, if you've never loved someone like that. You cannot outwaltz us. We have all the good dancers anyway. I'll confess, I don't know if I'm alive right now. I haven't heard my heartbeat in days. I keep holding my breath for the moment when the plane goes down and I have to save enough oxygen to get my friends through. But I finally found the argument against suicide, and it's us. We're the effigies that haunt America's nights harder the longer they spend burning us. We are scaring the shit out of people by spreading, by refusing to die. What are we but a fire? We know everything we do is for the kids after us. We'll be able to follow something towards safety. What can I call us but lighthouse? Of course I'm terrified. Of course I'm a shroud. And of course it's not fair, but rest assured, anxious America, you brought your fist to a glitter fight. There is a taco truck rally and all you have is coleslaw. You cannot deport our minds. We won't hold funerals for our potential. We have always been what makes America great.
I'll be home for Christmas. You can count on me. Please have snow and mistletoe and presents on the tree. Christmas Eve will find you where the love light gleams. I'll be home for Christmas, if only in my dreams. Christmas Eve will find me where the love light gleams. I'll be home for Christmas, if only in my dreams. If only in my dreams.
Lest you suppose that the notion of glitter revenge is a mere conceptual metaphor, consider the work of former NASA engineer Mark Rober. Displeased by the activities of so-called porch pirates who were stealing unattended packages delivered by Amazon and others to doorways in his neighborhood, Rober applied his technical skills to the creation of a package designed to annoy and inconvenience such thieves with a shower of glitter. It took him 6 months of devious experimentation, but just in time for the Christmas delivery season, he came up with an innocent and tempting-looking device that, when opened, delivers a fan-driven cloud of a full pound of tiny, impossible-to-eradicate glitter all over anyone who happens to be close and the surrounding area. It then proceeds to emit bursts of, shall we call it stink spray, at 30-second intervals, causing the unreflective thieves to hurl it out of what is usually a car. This enables Rober to follow a GPS signal and later retrieve the opened package so that it can be reset and used again. Best of all, a setup of 4 cell phones records the events when the package is opened and automatically uploads to the cloud so that Rober can watch and hear the opener's incredulous dismay and share it on YouTube. One baffled thief, just before ejecting the package, was heard to bemoan that he would now have to explain to his girlfriend why there was glitter all over her car and who he had been with in it. Thieves who were observant and literate in 1990s American cinema might know that something was up, since the package is addressed on the typical Amazon label from Kevin McAllister, the young hero of Home Alone, to his bumbling burglar adversaries, Harry and Marv. So you see, Anthony, glitter has a good use after all. It is part of the resistance, as Christmas itself has always been. Before the Victorian era and its cultural recasting by the English author Charles Dickens, Christmas was a much more rowdy affair. It was part of the sequence of holy days and saints' masses by which serfs and peasants claimed some precious relief from the demand of incessant toil by their overlords. Uproarious dancing finally got the music we know today as carols banned from inside the churches and taken to the streets. The rich were expected to distribute largesse in the form of food, drink, and money to the poor, who enforced their demands with veiled threats like, "We won't go until we get some," in return for their blessings. It was a celebration of resistance to economic inequity and hereditary class. The New England Puritans famously tried to ban Christmas celebrations as both disorderly and pagan in origin. And in fact, they constituted a continuing resistance to the hegemony of Protestant theocracy in that colonial world. Dickens himself, for all his emphasis on the domestic rather than religious nature of the holiday, was perfectly explicit about its implications for resistance to injustice. At the end of the day, literally, The ghost of Christmas present reveals beneath its robes 2 starving children. Scrooge asks whether they are the spirit's own offspring, and he replies, "They are man's, and they cling to me, appealing from their fathers. This boy is ignorance, this girl is want. Beware them both and all of their degree, but most of all beware this boy, for on his brow I see written that which is doom, unless the writing be erased." Christmas for Dickens was not very much about Jesus, but it was certainly about more than top hats and rum punch. Or let us consider the classic 1946 American movie by director Frank Capra, It's a Wonderful Life. Filmed just after the end of the Second World War, it tells the life story of George Bailey, an upstanding citizen of Bedford Falls, with events leading up to the Christmas Eve crisis when his guardian angel is sent to prevent him from attempting suicide. Clarence, the angel, decides that the best way to address George's despair is to show him what his hometown would be like if he had never been born. George's more expansive life ambitions, including college, travel, and the hope to become an architectural engineer, have been consistently thwarted by his felt obligation to protect the legacy of his father's business, the Bailey Brothers Building and Loan, the only financial institution in town not beholden to its richest citizen, Old Man Potter. By viewing Bedford Falls without his influence, George finds that the absence of his personal relationships has made life much sadder and harder for all the people he cares about. But more than that, the character of Bedford Falls itself would be palpably different. Without the home ownership made possible by accessible mortgages from the Building and Loan, families would suffer from inadequate housing, which would create a tense, unstable environment full of problems. Now renamed Pottersville, what is it about mean, crabby, greedy people that makes them like to name things after themselves anyway? The town is filled with cheap bars, strip clubs, pawn shops, and dissolute locals, rather than the wholesome community George had invested in and worked to maintain. In addition to being appalled by the condition of the town, George is unable to bear the thought of his wife, Mary, dwindling into an old maid librarian, and his children never being born. Finally, acknowledging the value of his life, he rejects the temptation to throw it away, and in the end is rescued from his difficulties by the generosity and trust of the very people who have benefited from his friendship and presence all along. The story is a heartwarming testimony to the importance of personal relationships and mutual care. But like Scrooge's experience in A Christmas Carol, it is also something more political and even revolutionary than that. And if you don't believe me, just ask the FBI. At the time It's a Wonderful Life premiered, J. Edgar Hoover's internal national security agency was working hand in glove with Senator Joseph McCarthy's House Un-American Activities Committee to identify communist agents and members of the Communist Party in Hollywood. They were convinced that the relatively new medium of popular motion pictures was being used to spread propaganda and subtly recruit unsuspecting American citizens to sympathize with international communist ideas. It was easy enough to show that suspected party members had worked on a given movie, written it, directed it, acted in it. It was somewhat more of an interpretive task to show that the content of a particular film represented communist ideas. The first case was not at all hard to make with regard to It's a Wonderful Life. Despite having produced a series of highly successful propaganda films for the U.S. during World War II, Capra himself was viewed with suspicion because his previous hit, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, was considered decidedly socialist in nature. Dalton Trumbo, the famously blacklisted screenwriter, had authored a version of the preliminary script for Wonderful Life. And later screenwriters Albert Hackett and Francis Goodrich were considered to be close associates to known communists. But the subversive message of the film itself was more challenging. In August of 1947, a year and a half after the movie's release, to rather indifferent success the first time around, by the way, the Hollywood field office of the FBI issued a report about the content of 8 movies then in circulation. Mostly the focus was on the portrayal of military or overtly political matters or images of the Bureau itself. But one of those movies was It's a Wonderful Life. This report claimed that the portrayal of Old Man Potter as a Scrooge type was a rather obvious attempt to discredit bankers that resulted in Potter being the most hated man in the picture. This was noted to be a common trick used by communists. And the report argued that Potter could have been shown as merely following state banking laws and protecting his depositors, rather than ruthless and mean-spirited, without significantly changing the story. The report also noted a subtle attempt to magnify the problems of the so-called common man in society. This refers to the scene in which George defends his father's legacy against Potter's claim that offering accessible mortgages makes for a discontented, lazy rabble who then demand other entitlements and become less biddable as a workforce. In response, George says this: "Now hold on, Mr. Potter, just a minute. Now you're right when you say my father was no businessman. I know that. Why he ever started this cheap penny ante building and loan, I'll never know. He didn't send enough money to send Harry to college, let alone me. But he did help a few people get out of your slums, Mr. Potter, and what's wrong with that? Why, here, you're all businessmen here. Doesn't it make them better citizens? Doesn't it make them better customers? Would you say just a minute ago that they had to wait and save their money before they even thought of a decent home? You know how long it takes a working man to save $5,000? Just remember this, Mr. Potter, that this rabble you're talking about, they do most of the working and paying and living and dying in this community. Well, is it too much to have them work and pay and live and die in a couple of decent rooms and a bath? Anyway, my father didn't think so. People were human beings to him, but to you, a warped, frustrated old man, they're cattle. Well, in my book, he died a much richer man than you'll ever be. I know very well what you're talking about. You're talking about something you can't get your fingers on, and it's galling you. That's what you're talking about, I know. There's just one thing more, though. This town needs this measly one-horse institution, if only to have some place where people can come without crawling to Potter." This speech was one of the elements considered subversive by Hoover's agents, and I love it. But it seems to me that the scene about the run on the bank that we just saw a few minutes ago is actually more radical and indeed more lowercase communist by far. It is a scene that to me expresses the essence of covenant community. That people who work together for a shared goal, who trust each other and stay loyal in hard times, will always be better off in the long run than those who only seek their own selfish good and a quick buck. The thing that the FBI analysts, writing for a boss incapable of processing ambiguity, failed to note was this: George Bailey, too, is a banker. And one of the points of the movie, it seems to me, is that there are both Potter-type bankers and George Bailey-type bankers in the world. And it is up to each of us to choose which kind we are going to become. Another thing that the FBI found suspicious about the movie is that George debates at several moments whether his life has been a success or a failure. In Hoover's criteria, success was assumed to be an American value, which meant that movies that invited sympathy for anyone portrayed as a failure were clearly red propaganda. According to this analysis, Potter is more successful and therefore more American and more admirable than George, and should be the hero of the story. The more things change. But the transformation of Bedford Falls and the change in the character of the people George has known all his life suggests that something more than just individual moral choice is at work in this tale. George Bailey became the person he was not only through a unique set of personal experiences that we witness, but also in the context of Bedford Falls itself. The town shapes his options, his consciousness, his compassion, his sense of responsibility. The people of the imagined Pottersville are different because the environment and the values of Pottersville are different. Their social contract and their accountability to one another are different. The Bailey Building and Loan doesn't break the day of the bank run because its depositors make a decision when called to their higher selves by George's vision to be there for each other, to trust the fabric of their connection to their neighbors and their town and their institution. In the end, the building and loan is not the staff or the building or the $2 or any other amount of money in the safe. It exists in the minds and hearts of its subscribers, in their inescapable network of mutuality, as Dr. King would have called it. All fiat currency is an act of faith. Tear up a $1,000 bill and you have not destroyed any real thing in the world except a piece of paper. It's all about what we agree to believe. Seems to me that Christmas is about what we agree to believe, too. Or perhaps more importantly, what we agree to imagine together. We can imagine a jovial, generous toy maker living with his reindeer at the top of the world, creating both delight and avarice for children. We can imagine a newborn baby in a manger, signifying the untold possibility of every new life and the vulnerability of the disenfranchised and the stranger, wherever and whenever they are found. Perhaps we can imagine a choir of midnight angels stunning us with good news we hardly dare to believe and renewing the call to peace and goodwill that is always buried somewhere in our hearts. We can imagine a world where success is more than riches and power, and where, if we keep our heads together, when old man Potter is trying to manipulate us and buy us up and tear us apart, we can get through this thing. We can imagine a world where revenge is taken in glitter rather than fists, where the daughters of want and the sons of ignorance are provided for before doom is etched indelibly upon their bony brows. We can imagine a Christmas that is antithetical to arrogant supremacy, counter to ravenous capitalism, incompatible with rabid nationalism, a Christmas that does not consent to heartlessness, to callousness, to hubris, a Christmas of resistance that perpetuates the heart of that Middle Eastern child who once turned the world upside down in the name of a compassion that knew no borders and a love that had no walls. That Christmas is always there, hiding underneath the sentimental stories and the hot cocoa ads and the self-serving, self-important bustle of it all. The good news, that resistance remains possible, that the world we imagine together still has the capacity to shake the nations and shut down the powers that be and change your life and save the soul of our community. Imagine that. Listen, hear the angels sing. Go tell. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, or the warmth of community, or the fires of commitment. For all these we carry in our minds and hearts until we are together again. Now, if only for the season, let us banish cynicism and welcome wonder. If only for the season, let us set aside our worry and smile and sing. If only for the season, let us subvert jealousy and greed and become generous givers and grateful receivers. If only for the season, the brief, bright season of light and love, let us be wise enough to be a little foolish about candlelight and children and matters of the heart. If only for the season. So be it.
It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas everywhere you go. There's a tree in the Grand Hotel, one in the park as well. It's the sturdy kind that doesn't mind the snow. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas